Have you ever been at Dollar Tree and seen these stools and wondered what you could do with them? Well, in today's video, I'm gonna show you easy DIYs you could do with these stools. This year, Dollar Tree has updated their stools. They look completely different. The stool that they had last year had holes in the top. It also had 4 legs to it. But the new one this year is a little bit different. So you have a flat top to it. It has 3 sturdy legs. It also has these little stoppers at the bottom, and you have 2 pieces supporting it. So hopefully these are gonna be a little bit more sturdy. When you go to Dollar Tree, you may notice some colors that I didn't see at my store. I have been able to find the plant stools in white, black, red, green, and blue. Not sure if there's any other colors this year. You guys will have to let me know down in the comments. So for this first DIY, we're gonna be using a blue plant stool. We're also going to be using a placemat that they have out right now. This placemat is a really pretty flower, and on one side it's white and on the other side it's silver. I honestly didn't know which side I was gonna use, so I wanted to try them both out. So I wanted to add this placemat to the top of my stool, but I wanted to show the pretty petals. So I kind of put it on there where I thought I wanted it, and then I flipped it over. Using a Sharpie, I traced around the placemat, and then I cut it out roughly. Then I put the placemat on the top of the stool to see if I needed to cut any more. I always end up needing to, so I'll just cut a little bit more if there's some hanging over the edge. Then I determined if I wanted the silver or white. Based on it being a blue plant stool, I really wanted to go with the white. So then I did a complete layer of Mod Podge over the top of this stool. And then I placed down the placemat. And then I did another layer of Mod Podge over the top, and I let this dry, and here's how this stool turned out. Now, I'm not sure about your thrift stores, but my thrift store always has a ton of plates just sitting around, and I found these really pretty blue and white ones. They were chipped, so I knew that I couldn't use them as solid plates, but I thought I could use them in a DIY, so I picked up 3 of them. So my idea is to create a Quikrete style topper for my stool and then put the broken plates inside. To do that, I had to create a base. So I went in my craft room to see what I had, and I found this wood veneer that I had, and I thought this could be a good supporting piece. So I found a piece of plastic that I could put down as my base, and then I took the wood veneer and I wrapped it around my plant stool. I wanted it to be the same size as my plant stool. Once I was happy with it being about the right size, I duct taped it. And the wood veneer was a little bit long, so I did have to kind of pull it off and make it a little bit shorter. I really only wanted to make it about 1 or 2 inches in height. And then from there, I just added in some more duct tape. To put it onto the piece of plastic, I used some additional duct tape, and I duct taped it all around the edge. This is essentially going to be my template that I'm gonna put my Quikrete in. So I need to make sure there's 0 gaps. I want it to be completely covered. Now, I looked down at it and I knew that the circle was not perfect, but I was okay with that. I felt like I got it as perfect as I could. Then I mixed up my Quikrete. So I took a little bit of Quikrete, added some water in, and got it to a thick pudding consistency. And then I added it into my mold. I didn't get enough, so I actually had to add a little bit more. So mixed up some more Quikrete and added that into the mold. Now, I tried to make it as level as possible, and it wasn't really looking super level. So my next step was to add in a little bit more Quikrete and make this thinner. So I knew that if I put some thinner Quikrete on the top, that would level it out a little bit better. That seemed to do the job. Next, I wanted to add in my plates. So I took my 3 plates, put them into a bag, and then using my hammer, I crushed them up. Now, I didn't want them to be super tiny. I just wanted to kind of break them in half. So to add these plates in, I wanted to do the outside layer first because I wanted to use that pretty scalloped edge all around the outside of the Quikrete. So I placed in the different pieces along the edge. Then from there, I just filled it in and tried to push the pieces down so that they were as level as possible. I did this until I had all of the broken plates added to the Quikrete. If I got any Quikrete on the top of the plates, I tried to wipe that off, let this dry overnight, and then the next day, all you have to do is remove the duct tape, pull off the veneer, and it should come right off. Now you may notice that you have some edges that have kind of built up with the Quikrete. That's okay. You can just pull those off really easily. And if you need to sand it, you could also do that as well. I added E6000 to the top of one of my black plant stools, and then I added this Quikrete topper on top. And here's how it looks in my home. Now, whenever you're thrifting, you probably come across a lot of wood stools. You may even have some at your house that you're not using anymore. Let me show you how you can update any of your wood stools. So start with painting it with a color that's going to work well in your home. You guys know that I get paint samples at the beginning of the year and some of my favorite colors that I want to use in my home. I had this blue one that I thought would be perfect for this wood stool. So I started with the legs, and I'm going to paint the legs with this wood color. And then I came in and painted the top piece. Whenever you're painting a stool, you'll probably have to come in and do a second coat at some point. I wanted to show you a new technique you could do with this stool to turn it into a shelf. So you're going to need some macrame cord. I had this thicker macrame cord that honestly I bought probably a year ago. I haven't used it yet, and I thought it would be perfect for this project. And then I started at one edge, wrapping it around and hot gluing it in place. Then I'm going to continue to wrap the macrame around the bottom portion so that it's really tight together. This is going to form my shelf. So I did this all the way until I got to the other side, cut off the excess, and hot glued it in place. Now I have a great shelf so I could put things at the bottom here and use this as a decorative piece in my home. So I always try to look on high-end sites for inspiration, and when I was on Pottery Barn's site, I saw this little table in the corner and thought, hey, I could try to recreate that with a plant stool. So you're going to need a black plant stool, and then you're going to need a topper piece. You can buy these at Lowe's or Home Depot. Sometimes they can be a little bit expensive. I found this topper at Walmart and I thought it would be perfect. You're gonna have to use your wire cutters to remove the string that's attached to the top. I'm gonna start by staining this piece with a darker stain. I'll wipe off any excess with a paper towel. You want to put your stain on both sides and that outside edge. Let that dry, and then you can use E6000 on the center of your wood round, then place the black stool on top, and here's how it looks in my home. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Comment the word of the day, which is stool. I found these gorgeous napkins at Dollar Tree and thought they would be so perfect on a white stool in my daughter's room. So I picked up kind of the purple colored ones. They had this check pattern, and I'm gonna attach the check pattern to my white stool. So I started by taking all the tags off. Whenever you add napkins to a DIY, you have to remove the backing napkin. So every napkin usually has two pieces, so you want to pull those apart. Next, I'm going to put Mod Podge on about half of my stool on the top of it. And then I'm gonna place the purple napkin on. I only want the purple napkin to go about a third of the way up because I'm gonna be adding on an additional napkin. And then I'm gonna tuck that purple napkin around so that it goes completely on the back side there. If you have any excess, you can cut that off or tear that off. And just use your Mod Podge to kind of fold it around and have it go in place. Next, I'm gonna be using this floral napkin that looks great with that purple napkin. And again, I'm gonna remove that backing piece off. Then what I'm gonna do is cut around the outside of the flowers and the butterflies. It's okay if it's not perfect, but I just didn't want a lot of excess white paper. And Then I'm gonna add Mod Podge to the rest of the top of my stool, and then I'll place down this napkin. Again, adding it to the sides, wrapping it around the edges, and cutting off any excess. Now with the top of it, where the top of the flowers are, I made sure that I added on a layer of Mod Podge so that it was all nice and smooth. Now I'm not gonna put Mod Podge completely over the top of this. I am gonna put Mod Podge where the flowers meet that purple paper though. Let this dry completely, and I just think this looks so adorable. Pottery Barn has a lot of terracotta planters, and a lot of times they look worn like this. Well, if you look at the Dollar Tree planters, they look brand new. Some of them are starting to have texture, but not any of the terracotta ones yet. So I picked up one of the larger terracotta planters, and I also picked up one of the smaller ones. And I'm gonna show you how you can give these planters a little bit of dimension. So the first thing I did was I got kind of a creamish white paint, and I mixed that with a little bit of baking soda and just a tiny bit of water. To add this to my planters, I'm gonna be using a large brush, and I'm just going to wipe this onto my planter. I usually put the paint out on my table and just kind of brush this on. Really, I don't wanna add too much. So if you add too much, just come back in it with a paper towel and wipe off any excess. Do this to both the planters. Now to give it kind of a green, worn-in, antique look, I'm going to mix baking soda. I added in green, yellow, and red food coloring and just a tiny bit of water, and I mixed that together. Now to apply this mixture to my vases, I'm gonna be using some clear Elmer's glue. So I put my brush into the Elmer's glue, then I stuck it into the baking soda mixture and just kind of wiped that on. Now you wanna make sure that your baking soda mixture is completely mixed up, because I did have some red and green pieces of food coloring that I didn't completely mix up, so I was able to see those, but I just used a paper towel to kind of wipe them on. So you're going to sparingly add this to your planter, depending on how much green you want to show through. And I'll do that on both of the vases. Now the next step I did was actually use a little bit of that glue and some of that white paint and baking soda, and I'm going to just kind of put that on to give me a little bit more white. Once you take a step back and you look at it, you can decide, okay, do I want this to have a little bit more white? Do I want it to have more green? This is where you can really add on colors and make it look the way you want it to look. Let that dry, and then you can style these planters in your home. Dollar Tree has their plant stools back again. They're $5 and they're actually more sturdy this year. I would love to know what you guys think of these plant stools down in the comments. Now these stools are great for adding in some of the wood vinyl peel and stick that they have at Dollar Tree. I picked out one of my favorites and then I placed it upside down on the table, put the stool on top. Now, I was a little disappointed because it didn't completely cover the stool, but I'll show you how to fix that. I'm gonna use a pencil to trace around the stool. Then I'll cut it out, place the vinyl onto the top of the stool. Now there's a little area where I did have to pull off some vinyl and match it up. Using my scissors, I'm going to cut around the edge. And you could use this as a plant stool or a stool sitting out in your home. If you like a vintage look, here's an option you can try. Use one of the white stools and you're going to, again, take off all the plastic. I'm going to remove those black feet at the bottom. Then you want to go to your local thrift store and find a tray that you love, something that really speaks to you. I found this silver tray. I thought it was adorable. And the only criteria that you need to have is the tray needs to be wider than your stool for this project. But it's so easy to put this together. All you have to do is add a little bit of E6000 to the top of your tray and then place your tray on top. Let it dry for 24 hours and then the next day you can style it in your home. It makes a great side table. Now let's say there's a project you want to create with this stool, but the base is bigger than what you want to put on top. You're going to have to remove that top portion. And that's what happened for this next project that I wanted to make. So I used my angle grinder to cut where the top portion meets the legs because it's only attached in those 4 corners. And then on the last one, I kind of just pulled it off and it came off really easily, but that took care of removing the top. If you have a piece of furniture with drawers in it, hold on to those drawers because they make really cool vintage tabletops. I had this one side table that I was going to be replacing with something else, and it had this gorgeous drawer inside. It looked very vintage, very old, and I kept the drawer, and that's what I'm gonna be using to put as the top here. So what you wanna do with your drawer is just clean it up, get all of the dust off of it, and then you're simply going to add E6000 to the top of your legs and then place your drawer on top, let it dry completely, and then you can style it with plants or you can put decorative items around your house. I just love the vintage look to this piece. Not only can you use these tables for so many different side tables, they also make really great plant stools. If you have a white one, I would remove those rubber pieces off the bottom, or you could always spray paint them white, but you can put them out in your home. Just add on some of your favorite planters. Let me show you how I DIY'd this planter. If your Dollar Tree happens to have a Dollar Tree Plus section, you've probably already seen these $5 planters. They're really large, they're thick, they're gonna be perfect, and I saw this one, picked it up, and thought it'd be great for a DIY. Another item from Dollar Tree you're gonna need for this DIY is a trowel. They have these out in the spring section right now. You're also going to need some spackling. Now, this is something you can pick up at Dollar Tree. I actually have it in a large tub from Lowe's. I find that I use it for a lot of projects, so it's easier for me to get it in a larger tub. Now, what you're gonna do is you're going to start by getting some spackling out on the back side of your trowel. Then you're gonna take your trowel and press it onto the side of your planter, pulling it down to create the shape of a petal. You're gonna start at the top and do a layer all the way around. Now, I did this on those natural lines that are formed in the shape of my planter. After I got all the way around, I came down and I did another layer in between the petals I had created. Now, since this was on an area that was kind of at a point, I wasn't able to do a full petal, so I kind of had these smaller petals in between my larger petals, but I like the way that that looked. Every 1 or 2 times that you create a petal, you're going to need to get more spackling on the back of your knife so that they create a really consistent look. Now, after I did the second layer, I went down to my next layer and continued to add petals until I got to the bottom. Now, as you get to the bottom, you may have to flip your pot upside down and add additional petals. Now, you want to let this dry completely overnight when you're done. When I came back in the next day, I sanded it down a little bit with some sandpaper along the edges. That way, if you have any rough edges or anything that looks like joint compound, it's gonna be completely taken care of with this sandpaper. This is really easy to do, so just do it lightly all around the edges. Now, you can leave it natural. I decided I wanted to paint mine. On the outside, I used a beige texture spray. And then on the inside, I just sprayed it with a light beige color. I wasn't sure if you were going to be able to see this once I put in a plant, but I wanted to make sure that I covered that just because you could see some of that spackling along the top. So once I had everything spray painted, I let that dry and I styled it in my house with a plant that I had from IKEA. These plant stools are also great for outside. I wanted to see if there was a way that I could turn one of these plant stools into an ottoman. I know it's a little far-fetched and I wasn't sure if it was going to work out, but let me walk you through how I did this. So I started with a plant stool and then I also picked up a roll of foam from Walmart. And then I'm going to need some fabric to wrap with it. So you can go to Joann's, get any kind of fabric you want. I went with a brown Sherpa fabric just because that's very in right now, that Sherpa material, and brown is a very popular color right now. So the first thing I did was lay out my foam because my thought was I'm going to wrap foam around the entire piece. So I measured it out to where I would have foam wrapping around the entire body of my stool and maybe going over about 2 or 3 inches. The next thing I did was measure out a tabletop. So the way that I did this was just to turn my stool upside down, and using a Sharpie, I just marked where I wanted to cut that out so that it was the right size to fit on top of my stool. I marked where I needed to cut, and I cut out the foam. So I'm going to wrap the foam around, hot gluing it to the legs of my stool. Now I did kind of mess up because I hot glued the foam piece to the top of my stool, and then I realized I probably need to cover it first before I do that. So I had to pull that up, but it wasn't on there very long, so it wasn't a big deal. Next, I wanted to wrap the outside layer with the Sherpa. So I kind of did the same method. I made sure I cut my fabric, so I had about 2 inches extra on each side. That way I could wrap it around and hot glue it on both sides, the top and the bottom. Now where the fabric met up, I did fold it under and I hot glued that edge. If I probably could go back and redo this, I probably wouldn't have put the foam on top of each other. It made it a little bit bulkier on that side, but I'm hoping that that'll kind of be the back side to my project. Hot gluing the top all the way around, trying to make it as secure as possible. If I saw an area that was coming up, I just added more hot glue. And then I repeated those same steps by hot gluing it around the bottom edge. Now with my foam circle, I kind of did the same method as well. I put it down on a piece of fabric and I measured about 1.5 inches wider than the foam, cut out my circle, and then I went around and hot glued it to the foam and making sure that it was as flat as possible on the front. And then to attach it, I just added some hot glue to the top of the stool and placed it on top. And here is my affordable ottoman. Let me show you how to make a bench with these 2 stools. So start by taking the plastic off of the bottom of your stools. There's also these little rubber pieces at the bottom, and I'm going to pull those off because I want it to be a nice clean look. You can use whatever color base you wanted. I wanted to go with the white because it matched my living room a little bit better. Next, you're going to need a board. Now, you may have to go to Lowe's or the Restore to get a board. I did a project in my office where I used butcher block to create a shelf as well as a desk, and I had a bunch of leftover butcher block. And I had this one piece that was honestly the perfect size for this project. It was a little bit long, so I just marked where I wanted to cut it down, making sure that it fit on the back of my couch. And then using my miter saw, I cut on either side to create the length that I needed. The next step I did was to stain this with the color Early American. And to stain this board, I just used a paper towel to wipe on the stain, and then the paper towel also worked to remove any excess stain. I let this dry overnight. You could add a sealer to it, but I feel like the butcher block really does a great job of soaking up any stain, so I did not. And then to put it in my living room, I just placed the 2 stools behind my couch. Then I'll put the butcher block board on top, adjust your stools so that they're at the right angle for you, and then you can finish it off with a throw and some pillows. I wanted to use one of my favorite products, which is Quikrete, to create a table base. Now, the hardest part I think for this project was finding something that I could use as the structure for my table. I needed a round tabletop that was bigger than the stool. So you're not gonna believe what I used. I used an oil pan from Walmart. It ended up being the perfect size to create a tabletop. So I'm gonna be using a Quikrete. You can get this at any big box store, and you're going to mix the Quikrete with water until you get a pudding-like consistency. Now, I would recommend mixing the Quikrete in a separate container. So I'm gonna mix it up, and then I will pour it into my pan. Once you have it poured in, you just wanna shake it and kind of tap it to get it nice and level, and so that there's no air bubbles in your Quikrete. Continue adding it until you have the thickness that you desire on your tabletop. Once you're happy with it, you're going to take your black table and put it down into the Quikrete. Let this dry for at least 24 hours. Now, the next day I came back in and I wanted to take it out of the mold. I was seeing that it was completely dry around the edges. So I started by pulling off the pan around the edges, and then I lifted up on the stool and it completely came off. It was not connected in any way. So I'll have to glue that back together, but it wasn't a big deal. After I did this, I noticed that there was some circles on the top where the pan was, so I just used a little bit of sandpaper to sand down any imperfections. Now, to attach my stool, put some E6000 on the top of the stool, and then I'll place it on the Quikrete tabletop. Let this dry overnight, and this makes a perfect stand to set out with a plant on top. Let me know down in the comments which of these DIYs was your favorite. I love knowing your opinion. And make sure you subscribe because I want to see you back here, and I'll see you in our next one. Bye.